Evolutionists claim that humans and chimpanzees go back to a common ancestor roughly 6 to 7 million years ago. Now, what I like to do, and this was my approach, our approach in our latest debate on Modern Day Debate, where we debated the question, are humans and chimps related? Why I like to debate that question is because it gets to the heart of the issue. Evolutionists, they assert, it's their position that we are all related through common ancestry, plants, animals. So Sam, Matt, sorry to say it, you guys are related to banana plants. You guys are related to strawberries, mosquitoes. That's what the evolutionary model says. But wait a minute, if we stay as close to home as possible, think about this for a second. If we stay as close to home as possible, the evolutionist says that our closest cousin on the evolutionary tree of life is the chimpanzee. Okay, that's interesting. So when it comes to a human and a strawberry, they say we share a more distant common ancestor, way out here on the tree of life. Humans and chimps right here, nice and close in the evolutionary timeline. So if I can show you that humans and chimps aren't related, see that big X there? If I can show you that humans and chimps aren't related, what that means is, by extrapolation, humans and strawberries are definitely not related. So you could actually demolish the entirety of common descent and naturalistic origins by staying as close to home as possible and demolishing ape to man evolution. And so I touched on this in the first seminar, but now I want to go in detail because I've tested this out in many debates over the years. Formal debate wise on this topic, I've had about 100. And we've also done open mic challenges featuring Dr. Dino himself. And so I've been presenting this challenge over the years. I also presented it in our last couple debates. And what we got, as one of the commenters said in the live chat, is we got dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. And it's like a lot of these evolutionists, they can't even see that they're dodging because they've been so deceived and brainwashed to believe that they're related to strawberries. Anyway, so these are the Y chromosomes of humans and the great apes. In a nutshell, the Y chromosome is uniparentally inherited DNA. What that means is it's passed down on one side, which is the father's side. How do you know who's a man, who's a woman? Well, if you're XY, you're a man. If you're XX, you're a woman. So we, as men, pass on our Y chromosomes to our male children. It turns out you can take male Y chromosomes on the planet, trace them back to a single Y chromosomal ancestor. Based on mutation rates, which are fast, and levels of genetic diversity, that last common ancestor was just 4,500 years ago. Wow. That's what the Bible says about the flood, because that goes back to Noah. Anyways, when we compare the human Y to the chimp Y, here's the chimp Y. Right off the bat, it doesn't take a PhD to figure out, wow, completely different. I mean, this is the chimp Y. It's half the size as the human Y. The genetic contents are color-coded. So here's light gray. That's heterochromatin. That's this densely packed kind of DNA. And it used to be considered, for the most part, non-functional, but we know that it plays vital roles in nuclear organization, chromosomal stability, and gene silencing. Very important kind of DNA. You'll notice in the chimpanzee Y, it's not there. For the most part, it's not there. So according to the evolutionary model, they've lost the entirety of its heterochromatic arm. So here's the point. When you consider overall gene content, size differences, and architecture, the human Y and the chimp Y, as you can see here, is less than 30% the same. But then they want to tell us that humans and chimps are related through common ancestry. Okay, if that's the case, they're going to have to explain how all of these massive differences have accumulated in 6 to 7 million years. That's the challenge. Provide us a sophisticated mathematical model. Don't just give us mechanisms. Don't just assert mechanisms. Well, maybe these genes were deleted or these were duplicated. We're not interested in just those stories. We're not interested in evolutionary philosophy. We want an answer that's empirical. Notice this right from their literature. This is what I specifically like to do, is I like to derive and formulate my arguments directly from their own literature. Then they can't complain, right? Oh, that's a young earth creationist resource. Oh, really? Have a look at the title of this source. Again, right from the peer-reviewed literature. And they admit that human and chimpanzee Y chromosomes differ just a little bit. No, enormously in size and gene content. Just as I said from the visual, they say the chimpanzee Y is only half the size of the human Y. Here's the most recent analysis going back to 2024. It's all color coded. You could take the human compared to the chimp in the Y, 26.2%. They're nothing alike. It's because they're not related. It's that simple. Okay. So we got these massive differences. They're not just point mutations, they're massive structural reorganizations, gene losses, transpositions. Okay. These technical changes is what would need to take place. If humans and chimps share a recent ancestor, roughly 6 million years ago, as they say, then such radical divergence in such a short time frame should be impossible without breaking function. Could you imagine that much change in either the chimpanzee line or the human line? What that would do is actually break function. That would result in a high level of genetic degeneration. The Y chromosome is essential for male fertility. You can't change it that much without drastically affecting the creature, like chimpanzees, because they'll try and say that all of these changes occurred in the chimp line. So here are some of the rescue devices and how they're not answering the challenges. So my challenge is, okay, show me, because they can't provide you what that hypothetical common ancestor is. So you got humans and chimps on the tree. They go back over here. They converge on a common ancestor. So that common ancestor was neither human nor chimp. It was a common ancestor between humans and chimps. But they can't show you in the fossil record what or who that common ancestor was, nor can they provide what's called an ancestral Y chromosome reconstruction. So like we see in these debates, we get a lot of just so stories. Well, maybe the chimp lost these genes, or maybe because of sperm competition. Chimpanzees have wild mating habits, so maybe that resulted in a lot of change. Okay, again, this is evolutionary philosophy. We want you to model it. That's what we're interested in, okay? You can't just claim gain or loss without knowing the ancestral state. And notice this, 2010, the Hughes et al. Paper. The ancestral state cannot be determined. They even admit that they can't determine the ancestral state. Storytelling does not equal reconstruction. So what do we have? Or should I say, what don't we have? Well, we don't have a rate-based population genetic model. No critic. So any critic listening, even the theistic evolutionists like inspiring philosophy, you want to say that we're related to chimpanzees and strawberries. Okay. Show me a sophisticated population genetic model. I want to see the required duplication/deletion rates, required recombination rates, timeline feasibility. These structural differences are massive. As you saw in the visual, the human Y is twice the size. Guys, it's twice the size. Look at this. 62 megabases versus 30. The chimp is 30. Entirely different palindromic families. That's a specific sequence in the Y chromosome. Loss of the entire heterochromatic arm and pan. Notice this from 2024. Only 14 to 27% alignability. What that means is the Y chromosomes are so drastically different in the human and chimp that only a tiny portion can even align. But the rest is so different they don't have an alignable counterpart. So these are massive differences that no evolutionist has yet to model them, quantify them, test them, simulate them. They have not actually provided a model and proof. Go watch the debates that we've done. Here's a few questions. I've got a whole talk on this. I'll just run through these quickly. How did these massive architectural changes occur mechanistically in 6 to 7 million years? They got no answer. When did these changes occur within the proposed 6 million year time frame? Again, no answer. When or why did they occur? For example, what selective pressures drove or tolerated them? No answer to these questions. So again, no ancestral sequence, no rate-based model. This is enough to falsify their model. And this is all they do right here. This is why they failed. Even the best that they have to offer, like popular evolutionists on YouTube, Aaron Ra, Gutsy Gibbon. Critics list mechanisms, but never demonstrate that those mechanisms can produce the required changes in the required time. They complain. They assert that we as creationists don't do the science. But yet we're the ones doing the science. We're the ones making testable and falsifiable predictions. We're the ones that are modeling out our arguments. And they're the ones that are invoking nothing but stories. And that's why I say they dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. That's all we get from them. Until they do, the Y chromosome gap remains a fatal problem for human to chimp common ancestry. And for the critics, here's about 6 questions. What lineage lost what? Again, where's the ancestral Y chromosome reconstruction? And so they can't even address the first 2 in order to move on to 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So the next point I want to move on to is this idea of junk DNA. If special creation is true, then we should expect the human genome to reflect that. What that means is we as creationists can make a testable prediction. We would predict that the vast majority of the genome is functional. It's important. We would expect genomic treasure, not genomic junk. But if evolution is true, we'd expect junk. What do we find? Again, right from the conventional literature. This is the ENCODE project and subsequent projects. This is not a creationist saying this, guys. These are the evolutionists themselves. These data enabled us to assign biochemical functions for 80% of the genome, or there goes the junk DNA paradigm. What that's saying is over 80% of the genome has biochemical evidence for activity. And that has to be beneficial activity. And I'll tell you why. Because transcription, so you got DNA transcribed into RNA and then translated into proteins. Okay, that's your basic protein synthesis process. Transcription, translation. 80% of the human genome, so that's nearly complete, has evidence for function. Transcription is an energy-intensive and resource-intensive process. Every time you add a single nucleotide to a growing RNA chain, brothers, that consumes energy. It consumes ATP. So if that 80% was just noise, that's what the evolutionists are trying to say. Oh, that's just background noise. That's not real function. Well, then processes over time should actually weed out all of that genetic baggage. The fact that it's there suggests that it's functional. Okay, here's another example. Pseudogenes, once claimed to be evolutionary leftovers, genetic mistakes, we now know are necessary to sustain healthy life processes in the cell. Okay, if you Google or YouTube, what's the best evidence for evolution? Typically what comes up is endogenous retroviruses. But here's the important question. Okay, they'll say, well, we have these viral sequences that are shared between humans and chimpanzees, and therefore those viral sequences must have been inherited from a past common ancestor, suggesting common descent. But here's the question we need to ask ourselves. Are endogenous retroviruses really the ancient remnants of past viral infections? The evolutionists would say yes. Or are they created units of DNA function? If common design better explains the existence of ERVs, then we should expect what? Function. Okay, so let's see what the literature says. Oh, sorry, evolutionists. 2021, one of my favorite papers. How endogenous retroviruses protect us from viral infections. Right in their literature, what do they say? Long disregarded as junk DNA or genomic dark matter, endogenous retroviruses have turned out to represent important components of the antiviral immune response. So what these ERVs are doing is they're acting as these antiviral programs. They are protecting us from viral invasions. They're helping in the immune system. They work to determine cell types. And so, of course, we're going to share those with the chimpanzee because chimpanzees also need viral elements to fight off infections and to help with the immune system. Notice this from the secular literature again. They're admitting that if we didn't have ERVs, the placenta and the mammals that produce it, including humans, would have never existed. Here's another 3 papers you can date. There's so see, evolutionists are out of date on the literature. They use these arguments, but they're not even up to date on what their own literature is saying on this issue. Increasing knowledge. They even admit our knowledge about endogenous retroviral elements involved in cell immune responses is constantly increasing because we're in the infancy of understanding the DNA language. The DNA language is so complex and so sophisticated that as the years go on and the more that we study it, the more we realize just how functional it is. The genome is 4-dimensional. It comprises multiple overlapping codes, and it's filled with meta information. There's no way the DNA code could have evolved. And all of these DNA elements that they once said in the evolutionist camp were junk are actually turning out to be incredibly functional and essential for healthy cell processes. So asking, why do we share ERVs with chimps in the biological world would be like asking, Donny, why do all modes of transportation share engines in common? Well, engines are important to get the car moving. If you don't have an engine in your car, then your car is not going to get very far. Okay, so that's good design. Human engineers design in these homologous patterns. Why shouldn't God? And so why we share these ERVs in the biological world is good design, because we and the chimp, for example, both have babies. We both propagate. So we need DNA elements to function in embryological development. Notice this, just noise. This is what the evolutionists are saying. Oh, this is just all just noise. And I went over a couple of reasons why it's not earlier. Several lines of reasoning suggest that the majority of observed activity is not random noise. 1, energy cost. Transcription and binding are metabolically expensive. If most transcription were meaningless, cells would be wasting enormous amounts of energy. Natural selection should quickly reduce such waste. In other words, the fact that it's there means that it's functional. Transcription factor scarcity. Only limited numbers of transcription factors are produced. If they were binding randomly across the genome, they would be unavailable for the specific regulatory sites they must control. And we have independent studies showing how important these transcription factors are, and suggesting that no, this is not just noise. Okay. Cells are not sloppy factories. If the genome were dominated by meaningless transcription and random binding, the cell systems would collapse under interference. The better explanation is that much of this activity is functional. And as you can see here, we got functions listed for every single type of DNA element that was considered years and years ago junk. Again, ERVs playing an antiviral role in the genome, functioning and determining cell types, regulating gene expression. And you're not going to get functions in embryological development by randomly inserting viral DNA into the genome of a biological organism, because that's what the evolutionist is going to have to say, that these ERVs evolve these essential functions. But what that would actually do is disrupt genetic functionality rather than improve it, which is why special creation and separate ancestry is the best explanation for ERVs. Now, I've written an entire book on the topic, and I go over a model that I've come up with. It's called segregated design. It's a little too much for what we're doing here in this presentation, but here's a couple quick visuals on that model, and you can see more details on it in the book, showing that we can not only debunk ERVs as evidence for evolution, but we can also offer a superior model. So this is a slide I put together for my closing statement on our last debate we did about a week ago on Modern Day Debate. Every challenge that I brought up, none of them were answered. They weren't even touched. Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Y chromosome dissimilarity that we went through, they just so stories, evolutionary philosophy, no models. Hyoid bone transition, we'll get into that later in the program. Didn't answer that. LMN haplogroups, functional ERVs. These right here are several questions that you can ask an evolutionist that they'll have no answer to when they bring up ERVs. When they bring up ERVs, they want to put you on the defense. My recommendation is put them on the defense. Oh, you think ERVs are good evidence for evolution, for why you're related to puppy dogs and chimps? What is the evolutionary pathway by which an LTR evolved? LTR stands for long terminal repeat. It's a functional aspect of the ERV. They have no way to show you the mutation by mutation pathway by which those evolved. Ask them this: how did the preloaded regulatory functions inside ERVs arise in the first place? They won't have an answer to that. How does random viral insertion produce coordinated developmental timing? For example, ERV activation right at the moment of implantation. Any theistic evolutionist, any naturalistic evolutionist, please Answer these questions, respond, don't dodge. If you're going to confidently assert that young earth creation is pseudoscience and evolution is real science, then I want to see sophisticated answers to these questions. If ERVs already contain regulatory elements when they assert, how does that demonstrate evolution of new regulatory function? All you'll see is a lot of dodging. So here's many questions, obviously, I've put together on that issue, but now I do want to move on to some of these pieces of evidence for a young earth now that we've dismantled very thoroughly evolution. Okay, as you can see on the slide, the birth certificate of the universe. You might be asking yourself, we have the birth certificate of the universe? Yes, the Bible, God's word. So the strongest evidence for a young earth is actually scripture itself. Genesis is God's eyewitness account. In the beginning, God, that's who created. Beginning is time. Created, that's how. The heaven, there's space, and the earth, there's matter. Time, space, and matter, science tells us, based on the first and second laws of thermodynamics, had to have come into existence from an outside force. And we have an answer to that, whereas naturalistic origins has no answer. Secular scientists have no answer. We have an answer in Genesis 1. God created time, matter, and space. God created the heaven and the earth. And so we have the birth certificate of the universe. God created in 6 ordinary 24-hour days. This is confirmed by Exodus. Jesus Christ himself said that from the beginning of creation, he made them male and female, clearly referring back to creation week, day 6 to be exact. Matthew 23, the excellent point that Sam made, that Jesus refers to Abel right back to after creation, after the fall. Who were Abel's parents? Adam and Eve, real historical figures. Just as we consult history books to learn about historical figures like Abraham Lincoln or George Washington, we look to the Bible for the origin of time, space, and matter. Old Earth interpretations, what they do is they rest on philosophical assumptions such as naturalism and uniformitarianism, but the Bible provides the true record of creation. Okay, let's get into some science. Comets. I love this one. And we're going to refute some rescue devices. I gave a teaser of this in our last program, but this one I'm going to refute rescue devices, okay? So firstly, comets cannot last for millions of years. Why? Well, comets lose material every time they orbit the sun. At observed depletion rates, they cannot survive billions of years. This is based right from the conventional literature. Have we appealed to young Earth creationist literature at all in this first 30 minutes? The answer is no. You can demolish an old Earth and secular origins or evolutionary origins directly from the conventional literature. Okay. So the rescue devices, for example, like the Oort cloud, never been observed, never been detected. So the fact that these comets are moving around in an elliptical fashion, they're losing their icy material over time, suggests that they can't last for millions to billions of years. Refuting Simon Dan. So in the program we did last month, Sam, Matt, and myself, a prominent evolutionist responded to some of it. His name's Simon Dan. He's got close to 1 million subscribers. So he puts out this video. And I'm like, oh, let's see how he responds to the comet problem. And there's the title of his video, How to Misinterpret Everything. And he puts an arrow at me. So apparently I misinterpreted everything. So in his video, he invokes, to save the day for deep time cosmological evolution, he invokes 2 rescue devices, the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud. XX. Let's show you why. So here's a summary of his arguments. You can watch the video yourselves. He doesn't address the problem at all. So what he does is he appeals to the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt as if they are observational facts. But the Oort cloud has never been detected. Ask the evolutionists, show me a picture of the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is their lowercase g, God. Actually, anybody right now on the computer listening, type into Google or ChatGPT, has the Oort cloud been observed? And it's going to admit no. It's just completely hypothetical, because remember, they can't tap out and say, oh, the Bible's true, the universe is young. Because when you refute, Sam and Matt, when you refute the idea that the earth and universe are billions of years old, let's stick with the earth They say it's about 4.6 billion years old. When you refute that idea, it's like taking the pacifier out of a baby's mouth, and they're going to start crying. The evolutionist starts crying when you remove time, because to take fish to fishermen, here's the evolutionary story. Non-living chemicals billions of years ago in some warm pond somewhere managed to organize themselves and evolve into the first self-replicating molecule. Then from there, you get single to multi-celled evolution. Then you get the evolution of a fish. And then that fish climbs on land and evolves into an amphibian, and then eventually a reptile and mammal. And what's funny is then eventually that mammal goes back into the ocean and evolves into whales. That's the story. And then other mammals evolve into apes and then humans. What a fairy tale that is. And to remember that acronym, FARM, fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. Okay. So that's what they believe. But they require billions of years to take their bacteria-like organisms to biologists. So if you actually limit the age of the earth, then that means they don't have the billions of years to evolve a fish to fishermen, to evolve pond scum to people. So again, removing time is like removing their God, lowercase g God, because to them, time can do the unthinkable, to do what we don't observe today, okay? So that's why they're not going to tap out. They're going to invoke rescue devices. Well, maybe there's this Oort cloud out there that's helping to replenish the comets that are lost, okay? So let's continue. Here's why good old Simon Dan's rescue devices don't work. The Oort cloud has never been observed. Why should we even entertain it? Okay, nice. Again, that's evolutionary philosophy. Can you demonstrate it? Can you show us it? The Kuiper belt does not solve the problem of short period. So the interesting one is the Kuiper belt. It has been observed. It exists, but for many reasons, and you can see this right in the secular literature, in astronomy and astrophysics, it can't counterbalance the loss of comets. And I'll show that in a second. Okay, comets decay rapidly. They're too fragile to survive billions of years. Short period comets burn out in less than 10,000 years. Do you know what that means? At best, the evolutionist has 10,000 years for the solar system. Us creationists, that works perfectly. We believe in an Earth and universe about 6,000 to 7,000 years, under the 10,000 year time limit. Oort cloud rescue device, no telescope, never observed, simply invented to explain away the young comet problem, not based on evidence, but necessity. Kuiper belt. So here's the second one they appeal to. It's insufficient. It's real, but you can read right in the scientific literature that there's far too few objects. It's the wrong size distribution. It cannot supply comets at a required rate to replenish the amount of comets that are being depleted. You're going to need this massive reservoir of comets to make their way into the solar system. Comets look young because they are young. So again, Oort cloud, entirely theoretical. Challenge them to show you a picture. We got these massive telescopes. We talked about at the beginning, the James Webb Space Telescope that provided us the most sophisticated, incredible images of distant galaxies. If the Big Bang Theory were true, if cosmological evolution were true, then what we should see in the early universe, billions of light years away, is we should find infant or galaxies that are in the middle of evolution, evolving, yet we find them fully mature, functional, ready to go, beautiful in the same way that our galaxy is, which is supposed to have evolved a lot later. Dr. Jason Lisle, a young Earth creationist, predicted this before the data came out. It's truly an amazing time to be a biblical creationist. So you can look at the Hubble telescope, JWST, that's the James Webb Space Telescope, Pan-STARRS, Gaia, you name it. Not a single one has detected a single Oort cloud object. And this is the best that they got, guys. Even secular astrophysicists acknowledge that the Kuiper belt, Dr. Jason Lisle debunked this on our program. He's a creationist astrophysicist, but the important thing is even secular astrophysicists have acknowledged that the Kuiper belt is far too underpopulated by at least 2 to 3 orders of magnitude to supply the short period comets needed for a billions of years solar system. This is not a Cretaceous claim. This is openly admitted in the mainstream literature. There's a few papers for you. Okay, so Simon Dan, I'm sorry, the Oort cloud, never observed. Kuiper belt is real, but it can't do the job. If your model needs invisible clouds and missing mass to survive, you don't have evidence. You have a rescue device. It's all theoretical, all evolutionary philosophy. Okay. Next point, decaying magnetic fields. So obviously, we've seen comets, irrefutable at this point. The rescue devices appealing to the Oort cloud, Kuiper belt don't work. We have Earth's magnetic field. Well, measurements have shown that Earth's magnetic field is decaying exponentially. If the Earth were even 60,000 years old, the field would have been catastrophically strong, stronger than a neutron star, which can easily tear apart the molecules in your body. For that reason, the decaying magnetic field actually limits the age of the Earth, and their rescue devices don't work either. Secular scientists invented a dynamo model of the Earth's core to explain how the field could have lasted over such a long period of time. But this model fails to adequately explain the data for the rapid decay and the rapid reversals that it has undergone in the past. It also cannot account for the magnetic fields of other planets, such as Neptune and Mercury. A PhD physicist who's a Cretaceous named Dr. Russell Humphreys, he predicted what the magnetic fields of distant planets would be before we discovered them, if young Earth is true. Once they discovered those magnetic fields, guess what? You have one prediction here if the solar system is billions of years old. You have another prediction here if the solar system is young, less than 6,000 years. Guess which prediction came true? The young Earth prediction. There are so many predictions. Matt and I could take 3 hours going over the predictions that young Earth Cretaceous have made. It would blow your mind. Carbon-14 in diamonds. This is one of my favorites. This is getting into dating method. If every atom in the whole Earth were carbon-14, so radiocarbon, they would decay away so quickly that no carbon-14 would be left on Earth after only 1 million years. What is carbon dating? I want you guys to fully understand what we're dealing with here to show why this is yet another piece of evidence that demolishes the billions of years paradigm. And so notice on the visual, in a nutshell, scientifically, C14 is produced in the upper atmosphere due to cosmic ray bombardment. Okay, so you can see up here, cosmic rays bombard upper atmosphere. And this diagram basically illustrates how living organisms are constantly exchanging C14 while alive. Okay, so I'm eating plants, I'm eating animals, plants and animals are taking in C14. And so there's a balance at play. But once you die, you're no longer taking in C14 because you're no longer eating animals, you're no longer eating plants. Okay, so in a nutshell, C14 is produced in the upper atmosphere. Living organisms take in that C14, lose it over time, but we're also taking it in all the time. Once we die, we're no longer taking it in. Now, the half-life of C14 is so short, it's about 5,600 years roughly, that, like the other slide said, if every single atom in the universe were C14, it would have all decayed away in something more like 500,000 years, but just give it to the evolutionists. Let's say 1 million. I mean, they believe the Earth is 4.6 billion. So just give them 1 million. So here's a testable prediction. Anything that we test in the so-called geologic column that's older than 1 million years should have what? No C14. That's simple. Is the Earth old? Is it young? Here's the perfect head-to-head test. Is there C14 and is there a lot of C14? It's young. Is there no C14? It's old. So simple. Watch this. It's going to blow your mind. Let's do the test now. This is an ammonite, a sea creature, was discovered in California, accompanied by fossilized wood. Both fossils are claimed by strata dating to be 112 to 120 million years. When you hear that, millions of years ago, you know it's the start of a fairy tale. Long ago and far away, you were once a fish, right? According to P.Z. Myers. Anyways, so this was supposedly 112 to 120 million years. And we checked it for C14, and there was C14 present, showing that it's only thousands of years old. We found C14 in coal that's supposedly hundreds of thousands to millions of years old. We found it in oil, supposedly millions of years. Basically, anything you test, you know what you find? C14. But if the earth was old, how does any theistic evolutionist, inspiring philosophy, let's see him address our best arguments. Don't focus on weak arguments. Address our best arguments. Carbon 14 and fossilized wood, supposedly millions of years old. Nope. Suggests thousands. This is the best one. Diamonds. So diamonds are the hardest substance on the planet. They're supposedly formed deep within the earth, which means they're resistant to cosmic ray bombardment in the upper atmosphere. So they should be resistant to contamination, okay? There's no way that if those diamonds are billions of years old, that they should have C14 in them. Well, geophysicist Dr. John Baumgartner, this is incredible. So we did 2 seminars. There's what's called the RATE project. RATE stands for radioactive elements in the age of the earth, if I remember correctly. So numerous PhD young earth creationist scientists, a couple of them, Dr. John Baumgartner and Dr. Andrew Snelling, they took part in this research project. Incredible research project. They made predictions going in. We should find certain things here if the earth is young. We should find certain things here if the earth is old. And what they found lined up with the young earth model. We just did a seminar last month with Dr. Andrew Snelling. He was one of the leads in this project. We went for 3 hours. He just absolutely demolished the old earth paradigm. Geophysicist here, Dr. John Baum. Do you see how many scientists we have on our side? Well-credentialed, well-educated, well-respected scientists. Dr. John Baumgartner, he specifically investigated the C14 in diamonds. We did a seminar with him, and I asked him directly these questions. I mean, we got it right from them, okay? Anyway, so there should be no C14 at all in these diamonds if they really were over 1 billion years old. Yet, the radiocarbon lab that they sent these diamonds to, and remember, you can't even tell these labs that you're a creationist because they won't test it. Because firstly, they're thinking, well, of course there's no C14. The earth is old. Secondly, if you're a creationist and you tell them that, well, they're definitely not going to want to do the test for you because they're going to be worried. Well, if there is a little bit of sort of C14, then we're giving ammo to the creationists. Okay. So anyways, they tested these and there was over 10 times the detection limit. Thus, they had a radiocarbon age far less than 1 million years old. Dr. Baumgartner repeated this with 6 more alluvial diamonds, and these had even more radiocarbon. Guys, the presence of radiocarbon in these diamonds is confirmation of a young earth. There's no way to refute it. Here are the rescue devices. The first cry is, it's just all contamination. Evolution's true. The earth is old. We know it. Just believe us because we tell it, we're telling you so. So they'll say, oh, it's all contamination. Yet for 30 years, AMS radiocarbon laboratories have subjected all samples. They know what they're doing, guys, okay? They're not just being guilty of contamination in all these reports. Before they carbon date them, what they do is they subject these samples, guys, to repeated brutal treatments with strong acids and bleaches to rid them all of contamination. That means the C14 that's found needs to be intrinsic, as in it's real C14 in that sample, not due to contamination. Here's another one. Oh, well, new radiocarbon was formed directly in the fossils when nearby decaying uranium bombarded traces of nitrogen in the buried fossils. This is what Dr. Hugh Ross appeals to. If you want to watch a really good debate, Dr. Jason Lau versus Dr. Hugh Ross, Dr. Jason Lau, I mean, he just smoked him on distant starlight. Hugh Ross tried to bring up this rescue device and Jason Lau shut it down real quick. And it was discussion too. It wasn't just strict formal. So it was really good. We got to see them duke it out. So anyways, why this doesn't work. Carbon 14 does form from such transformation of nitrogen, but actual calculations demonstrate conclusively, notice this process does not produce the levels of radiocarbon that world-class labs have found in fossils, coal, and diamonds. In other words, to recharge the C14 in these samples like diamonds, you'd need thousands and thousands times the more nuclear material in nearby rocks to recharge the C14. It's just not going to happen. It's a rescue device. Here's another argument. C14 in diamonds and coal can be explained by in situ production through uranium and thorium decay. Coal acts like a carbon sponge. Basically the same argument, but a different way to address it, or a different angle. That explanation doesn't hold up quantitatively. For neutron capture to produce measurable C14 at the levels consistently observed, you'd need thousands of times more uranium and thorium in or near the sample than actually exists. So why I went over that twice is because that's the best they have to offer. That's what your PhD old earthers are bringing up, and it doesn't work. Another one, this is a weaker one, but these guys get very desperate, right? So they're just kind of throwing things at the wall, seeing what's going to stick. Argument. Environmental contamination could have introduced modern carbon into samples. You know, one thing we like to do in our presentations that you might not find everywhere is I like to present the evidence, but I don't like to move on real quick. I also like to address objections and challenges. And because we've been doing this for so long and we've done so many debates, I know all the rescue devices. Sam, for example, when he's demolishing these anti-Trinitarians, when he's demolishing Islam, he not only knows the arguments, he knows the counter objections. He knows the counter objections to the objections. So he can give the argument and refute the rescue devices at the same time. And to me, that's more comprehensive. It helps us to leave no stone unturned. And it equips you guys with not only the argument, but also the responses to potential objections and criticisms. Okay. So this argument collapses under the weight of consistency. Environmental contamination, if real, should be random and irregular, affecting some samples heavily and others minimally. Yet carbon-14 levels are found in virtually every sample tested. Are you telling me that environment is just contaminating every sample at every level of the geologic column in a way that gives us consistent results? Give me a break. Just tap out. This is desperate. And this is why it's very hard. Yes, we get militant evolutionists to debate the science. Clearly, Matt and I, we've done 3 major formal debates in the last 4 or 5 months. But it's very difficult to get a theistic evolutionist to debate the science. They don't know all this. They'll get stopped and then they're going to lose credibility with their audience. Okay. Militant atheists, they got no shame. So they'll jump into the debate coliseum. They'll get destroyed. That's okay for them. Coal, fossil wood, oil, carbonates, and diamonds, all yielding C14 ratios far above detection thresholds, meaning it's not noise, but remarkably similar in magnitude. The uniformity strongly suggests original carbon signal, not random contamination. Furthermore, to contaminate deep, isolated samples sealed within the earth for supposed millions of years, modern carbon would have to diffuse uniformly through kilometers of rock. That's not going to happen, guys, which is geochemically implausible. Detectable levels of C14 have been consistent. Guys, this isn't an anomaly. Oh, well, this is just an anomaly. Maybe we don't have an answer, but Earth is still old. No. Detectable levels of C14 have been consistently found in samples taken from every level of the geologic column. Pay close attention to that. Every level of the geologic column, from coal to diamonds. Because remember, diamonds are said to be the oldest or the hardest substance on Earth, formed billions of years ago. The Earth is only, according to them, 4.6 billion years old. The readings are remarkably uniform. So this uniformity is key. That suggests it's not contamination, or else the numbers would be all over the place. It's uniform and it's consistent because the Earth is young. The C14 is there because the Earth is not billions of years old, because if it was, the C14 would have decayed away. This pattern is far more consistent with a young age for the carbon in these materials than with random contamination or in situ production. The background noise argument. Oh, we've heard this over and over again. When we say that a sample's C14 measurement is above background, that means the detected C14 activity is significantly higher than the known noise level of the equipment. Therefore, it's not just instrumental noise. It's a real measurable signal. Guys, this is a real signal. It's not artificial. It's not noise. And this is a major problem. Why? Well, because the C14 levels detected in these samples are well above the instrument's background noise, meaning they represent a real measurable signal and not experimental error. Here's the conclusion. C14 is present in all these samples because why? The materials themselves are not millions of years old, they're thousands. Why do we have comets, even though they can only last, these short period comets, less than 10,000 years? Because the universe is less than 10,000 years old. Why is there such massive discrepancies and discontinuities in the genetics between humans and chimps? It's because humans and chimps aren't related. Why does the Bible, the birth certificate of the universe, tell us that Adam and Eve were the first two people? The earth is roughly 6,000 to 7,000 years old. That's because it's true. The Bible claims to be the history book of the universe. And as we can tell from all of this data, the science actually confirms and complements what the Bible tells us about our origins and the creation event. Diamonds contain real C14 up to 310 times above detection limits. Powerful evidence they're young, not ancient. I dare a single critic to try and refute this. Notice this, right from the secular radiocarbon literature. You don't even have to trust us. Go to the literature, go look at the dates, go look at the material, and go see that they're finding C14. Here's 10 coal samples. The rate team, they analyzed 10 coal samples, and they found C14 in all of this coal. Here's diamonds. Rate, C14. It's just incredible that the rate team, a group of young Earth creationist scientists, they made these predictions, as in we should find evidence for a young Earth. And that's exactly what we found.